Good morning. Welcome to the garden. I'm glad you're here with us on this rather chilly sun morning. And incidentally, if you're new to the garden, we aren't always like this. Most of the time we are, but we're not always like this. And I find myself wondering how many churches were using the same music we were this morning. Just wondering. So thought I would ask at any rate. Well, I don't know about you, but I am not terribly good at waiting. And it seems as though we have to wait all the time. Kids, for example, are eagerly awaiting the arrival of Christmas. In fact, our granddaughter yesterday asked, how many more sleeps till Christmas? And that's how she's doing the countdown to it. And she has her advent calendar, and she opens a door every day, and she really wants to open all the doors. But, that's part of the waiting game. She has to do that. Well, we wait all the time. Sometimes we have a friend or family member arriving at the airport, and so we pull into the cell phone lot and wait to get the call that the plane's arrived and they're headed toward the door so we can go pick them up. Waiting is a daily part of our routine. It seems like we wait at the grocery store to get to the checkout lane. We wait at a restaurant before we can be seated. And if we've ever traveled with kids in the car, how many times do we hear, are we there yet? How much longer is it going to be? Now, those are sort of the normal kinds of times that we have to wait, but there are some times that are much more difficult than that. For instance, sometimes we wait for that call from the doctor's office to tell us how those test results came out. Or maybe we've taken one of those all-important qualifying exams and we wait to hear whether or not we actually passed and if we qualify. Sometimes, if we've ever had a loved one in ICU, we know how difficult it can be to wait when we're told by the doctors, well, the next 24 or 36 or 72 hours are going to tell us the tale. They'll tell us how this is all going to turn out. And if we've ever gotten the call that someone we care about has been in an accident, that time driving to the hospital can seem to be interminable, that it takes forever to get there, and the whole time we're filled with fear and dread. I think part of the problem we have with waiting is that it seems like such an in-between time, as though it's wasted time, that nothing really important or really significant is happening there, and so it makes it hard for us to wait. And it's particularly hard for us to wait in today's society because we live in a nanosecond society. We can get the answer from Google faster than we can type in the question that we have. We're used to our news coming the moment something happens. And we have all of these so-called fast food restaurants that we can get whatever we want to eat at any hour of the night or day. We're used to getting what we want when we want it. And we're not very good about waiting. And yet I wonder if we aren't shortchanging something in our lives. I wonder if there isn't some sort of benefit to be gained through the merits of waiting a little longer, of waiting for something to come into its own time. Well, in its own way, I think the Bible passage that we have for this morning may be addressing that. This is Paul writing to the people in the church in Rome. And he has an analogy here that I particularly like that I think fits for us. But let's read through it, and then we'll try to unpack it a little bit. All around us, we observe a pregnant creation. The difficult times of pain throughout the world are simply birth pangs. But it's not only around us, it's within us. The Spirit of God is arousing us within. We're also feeling the birth pangs. These sterile and barren bodies of ours are yearning for full deliverance. That is why waiting does not diminish us any more than waiting diminishes a pregnant mother. We are enlarged in the waiting. We, of course, don't see what's enlarging us, but the longer we wait, the larger we become, and the more joyful our expectancy. Now, if you read what some of the scholars talk about in this passage, which is greater than just the portion we have here, they will often tell us that what Paul was urging his readers to do was to look forward to the coming time of Jesus, to the return of Jesus, and that ultimate kind of outcome that he was intending to see happen. And that's a focus of the passage, but that's not what I'm pulling from it. Rather, I'm looking more closely at that analogy where he talks about a woman who is pregnant and the waiting time that has to happen there. Paul says that waiting time does not diminish her, instead it enlarges her. And I think what he wants us to understand is that that time of waiting is important and it's necessary for the full development of the child. And I think he's trying to help us understand that we can benefit. There's something good and positive from waiting, something that we can gain as the result of it that helps us in our full development as well. Now, if we just stop to think about it, we don't throw a seed in the ground and expect it to show up the next day, that we're going to have a full bloom. And it doesn't work that way. And so it takes time for things to come to total fruition. And we have to wait. Fine wine is not something we drink the day after the grapes are harvested, because it takes time for them to become more flavorful and to age. Many of you know that my husband Mike does most of the cooking in our household, which is a good thing for both of us. And he has this thing that I tease him about a lot, because he'll fix something, some sauce or some dip or some marinade, and he says it has to cure. That it's really important that things kind of rest and sit in it for a while. And he insists that it enhances the flavor. And, well, what do I know? So I take him at his word on that. Now, there's something else when we talk about waiting that I think we need to consider, and that is that waiting can be helpful. There really may well be something we can learn in the course of waiting that we can't learn any other time. And waiting, when I'm talking about waiting, it's not just sitting around tapping our fingers or tapping our foot. It's not passive waiting. It's what I would call active waiting. It's being more involved and more active in the midst of that. Now, let me give me an example of what I'm thinking about. Suppose we have an athlete who's preparing for a competition. That athlete doesn't sit in a chair and just calmly mark the days off the calendar till the competition and then show up for it. It just doesn't work that way. The athlete has to prepare. He or she has to practice. They have to be in condition in order for that to work. So they're constantly doing whatever needs to happen to be ready for that ultimate piece that they're about. The same thing is true of us. If we have a dream or a hope for something for the future, we need to be actively involved in getting ready for that. Suppose it's a different job or moving down another career. Then often we'll have to be retooled. We'll have to be retrained. We'll have to go into some enhanced learning. And so we take the time actively and use it to better ourselves in whatever way we can. Someone has said, we cannot wait for the storm to pass over. We must learn to dance in the rain. So there definitely are benefits to come from that waiting. This brings me to thinking about another concept that we call delayed gratification. And I have to acknowledge that I wonder sometimes how future generations will be with this whole concept of delayed gratification, of actually foregoing some lesser reward or result in favor of waiting a while for there to be a greater award or result. How will that work? Will they be able to do that because of the world in which we live? Now, some of you may have heard about the Stanford marshmallow experiment that was conducted by Walter Mischel back in the late 60s or early 70s. And this is basically what the experiment consisted of. A group of children were gathered together, and marshmallows were put in front of them. And then the experimenter told the children that he was going to leave the room. And if they ate a marshmallow while he was gone, that was it. That's all they got, was that marshmallow. If, however, they refrained from eating the marshmallow until he had come back, then they could have 2 marshmallows, helping them understand that if they waited, there would be something bigger, something greater after the wait than before. Well, when he came back, lo and behold, some children had eaten the marshmallow, and that was all they got. Other children waited, and they restrained themselves, and they were able to have 2 marshmallows then. And what they discovered as a result of this experiment is that those who kept from eating the marshmallows while he was out of the room actually did it by focusing on something other than the marshmallows. They did something else that occupied their mind to distract them from the marshmallows, and they were able to wait effectively. Now, interestingly enough, they followed those children all through life. They followed them through their school years and then on beyond that. And they made several discoveries that those who were able to wait in whatever period of time they had to wait, were ones who had fewer behavior problems, they had lower stress, They had built stronger friendships, and they even had higher SAT scores. They were determined to be well-adjusted psychologically, that they were dependable people, and that they were in fact self-motivated. And the really interesting thing they discovered is that those characteristics stayed with them all through life. They were good for life. Well, the long and short of it is that waiting is good for us. It's beneficial for us. We do learn something that we can't learn any other way. And one of the things we learn is that wonderful gift of patience. We learn to be patient because we learn that we don't have control over everything that happens or over everyone in our lives. Let me give you a rather mundane example. And I guess probably I'd have to admit I'm talking to myself a little bit here. But suppose we're driving down the road and the person driving the car in front of us is driving 10 miles below the posted speed limit. I have found out that it doesn't do any good to yell and scream or tailgate. It doesn't seem to accomplish the purpose of moving them more quickly. And I'm trying to learn to be a little bit more patient at times like that, and to get distracted, to look around, to appreciate the beauty, to take that time as a deep breathing time, as a more relaxing time, to just kind of de-stress a little bit and let it be okay. We'll still get there. We may not get there right when I thought we would, but, it's just a matter of, get over it, McCoy. That usually tends to work a little bit better. And the other thing about this whole waiting and developing patience is that it helps us control some of our impulsive kind of actions or addictive kind of behaviors. Now again, a sort of mundane kind of example, but suppose we see this sweater and we think, I have to have that sweater. Well, instead of making a quick decision and doing that, instead we decide, no, we're going to wait a while. We're going to wait a few days and see if we still would like to have that sweater. And then we'll go and see if it's still there. And then maybe we'll see whether or not we can actually afford this. We can evaluate a little bit more. My hunch is that if we wait, if we give things some time, we'll make a little better decision as a result of it. You see, what we're talking about is the value that comes in waiting, and we have to do it all the time. It is just a part of the reality of life. We have to wait for the seasons to change. We have to wait and prepare our hearts and minds and spirits for Christmas to arrive. And so it's important to wait. It's important to learn that, because in the process of learning that patience, we will discover that we'll be better people. So why don't we just kind of kick back a little bit, de-stress a little bit, and just appreciate this waiting season in which we find ourselves, shall we?